tell me how you got into playing old-time harmonica.
Well, my great-grandmother and my grandfather played harmonica, and so it ran in the family. And then when I was in 7th grade, I got my first one when I was visiting my aunt in Memphis, Tennessee. And it was called the Blue Danube. It was an ergonomical little piece. Had a rounded back. I still have it, but it's not very good, so I don't play it anymore. But it works.
And did you learn some stuff from your family, or did they just give it to you and tell you to figure it out yourself?
No, I just taught myself. At that point, I was in Central Arkansas, removed from the source. So I played things like simple gifts or common tunes that you would just have stuck in your head.
And was it addictive from the start, or?
Yeah, I think I enjoyed it. I didn't get back into it until I was 23. So I took a break when I was drawing. So it wasn't until I moved to Fayetteville, Arkansas that I got back into playing the harmonica. And I ran into this band called Shout Lulu with Paul and Sky McGowan and Pete Howard on the fiddle. And then I took a trip to Scotland for research purposes, and then decided to learn their tunes so that when I came back that I would be joining the band. And so it did work out that way. I guess they thought the novelty of the harmonica was something that should be appreciated in the old-time world.
But did this band in Fayetteville have a harmonica player?
Nope. So there was an opening, as far as I was concerned. Yeah.
And was that your entree into old time on the harmonica, or?
Yeah, so like, I guess my great-grandma, she would play hymnal tunes, and then my grandfather would play things like On Top of Old Smoky and, just those common childhood tunes that you would have stuck in your head. But then getting into the world of old-time fiddle music, and then especially old-time harmonica, and then all the recordings associated with that, that was my entryway.
Mm-hmm. And tell me, your great grandma and your grandfather, when would they play? When do you remember them playing?
Well, just at family gatherings. I mean, it was a pretty common thing. I think, so my great-grandmother, she played also the quills, which was, I guess there are probably like 6 people that have been recorded playing the quills. The quills is, you can think of it as like a precursor to the harmonica itself. It's a mouth-blown instrument. It's small, portable, and it used to be a really popular instrument before the Civil War, especially on the plantations. So anyway, her uncle, who had well over 80 great-grandchildren, according to himself, he must have been doing some logging work down in Helena, Arkansas, and that's probably where he picked it up, and then he took it back to the Ozarks and then taught my great-grandmother how to play the quills. And so the quills is like alternate. It was just 2 canes with alternating notes, and then between those notes you would weave in hollering, like ooh, ooh, ooh.
And that's how you get different pitches.
Yeah.
The quills themselves had 2 pitches and bends, and then you could add vocal tones as well, or?
Yep. So then that was pretty popular around the family, saying, play the quills, great-grandma, play the quills. And then she would also play the harmonica and it's kind of like historically, this is sort of the transition. The harmonica very likely killed the quills as a folk instrument in some sense because it became so popular. And it was just more versatile from a musical standpoint.
Right. Cool.
Yep.
So just hanging out and great-grandma and grandpa are playing harmonica.
And telling ghost stories.
Telling ghost stories.
Yeah, so if you ever read those Vance Randolph books, the guy who went around interviewing people in the Ozarks, some of the ghost stories that they would tell in those books, they would be told to the grandkids and great grandkids. Just really, they were pretty scary stories. I want my toey toe.
And so when you started playing old-time harmonica, did you know that there were models for that? Like, how did you go about figuring out how to do that?
Well, I guess at that time it was around 2008, so the internet helped a lot. So I found contemporary players like Mark Graham and Dave Rice, who had spent about 3 decades each playing old-time harmonica in slightly different ways. And then also was able to find quite a few resources on people like Dr. Humphrey Bate, D. Ford Bailey, and other really virtuosic harmonica players from the 20s and 30s who were recording at that time, and also playing on the radio.
So it was possible to go back and find recordings and listen to what people were doing?
Not as easy as it is today, but another thing that I did find in a CD shop, and this is a place where they sell these little plastic discs in what they called a jewel case, although that was also made of plastic. It wasn't worth a dime. And there was this CD compilation by Yazoo called Harmonica Masters, and so it was like cherry-picked some of the best recordings of harmonica from the 20s and 30s. And so that was a really inspirational thing. And I'm still working on some of those tunes after 10 years, and it's really difficult material.
And were they playing fiddle tunes or all kinds of stuff? Or?
Yeah, I mean, the harmonica could be broken down into the fiddle tunes by players like the Crooks Brothers, it was a twin harmonica band, and then the Murphy Brothers band as well was a twin harmonica band. So no fiddle at that point in either of these two bands, and they were playing fiddle tunes. And the Crook Brothers were playing on the Grand Ole Opry at the beginning days, and then Herman Crook, I think, was the longest running person to appear on the Grand Ole Opry even to today. So from maybe 1925 or so until the late 80s, Herman Crook would have been making appearances on the Grand Ole Opry. And then there were the sort of urban proto-jazz harmonica players. And then there were the pre-Chicago blues harmonica players on that CD compilation. And then there were the sort of solo masterpiece harmonica players like D. Ford Bailey or Noah Lewis, who had just come up with like really beautiful things on the harmonica by itself. Mm-hmm. As sort of a solo show, not really meant for dancing or any other purpose other than to play the shit out of a harmonica.
Right. But so that's curious that you say that harmonica showed up in the Grand Ole Opry for all that time. Why do you think it's not become a prominent part of old-time music or of just American traditional music genres in general, if it was present for such a long time?
Well, I talked to Ralph Stanley one time, and I asked him if he knew a lot of harmonica players, and he said, well, I used to play harmonica before I picked up the banjo. And he said, but it was too hard. That's what he said, but I think he was maybe joking. But
you're not sure.
Well, I think one of the things is that the sort of virtuosity of the music in the 40s. So old time transitioned to bluegrass, Piedmont country transitioned to country music in some way. The blues transitioned to Chicago blues and then sort of like swing time rhythm based things. And then they started incorporating more ideas from jazz, which if you think of the harmonica, it has 10 holes with 19 notes. over 3 octaves, so it's not a chromatic instrument. So in some way, it's really just pointless to try and keep up with more complex music. So in the early days of the Grand Ole Opry, the music was simpler, and so it would have been just normal to have a harmonica playing there with the fiddle, or playing fiddle tunes, or even playing the harmonica masterpieces, like the Foxchase and Train Song.
But it's not limited in terms of most old-time fiddle tunes.
No, it's fine for old-time fiddle tunes. It's not greatly suited to bluegrass, and then anything after that, it's just a challenge. And I think there are better instruments that you could choose to play if you really wanted to have an impact in those genres. The learning curve is too steep for a harmonica player. So harmonica players are usually the dumbest of the dumb of musicians. So to ask that of them is quite a lot, and it's rare that you'll find someone that takes it that far.
But actually playing the harmonica is really hard. Playing the harmonica well is really hard.
Yeah, I think so. But it takes us a long time to get to that point.
Why do you keep playing old time?
Well, in Fayetteville, we have a good community. And so if I were to think of where my permanent home is, it'd be in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And I have a lot of friends, and like the Ozark Highballers, and then Pete Howard, that I play old-time music with. So it's a social thing at the end of the day. And then there's the academic side of the history, and then also the harmonica masterpieces that I'm interested in personally, and getting better and better at. But then coming to Berlin and playing music with somebody, it's like a passport to the world in some way. So that's why.
You've also been doing research on the history of the harmonica in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Is there much out there already?
There are a couple of harmonica historians that know quite a bit. I mean, especially of the times of recordings and the recordings that these recordings were made. From those times and into the Chicago blues era of harmonica, a lot of historians exist, and a lot is known. And then what I was interested in was the time when the harmonica first made its appearance in America, so from the maybe 1840s or so until those masterful recordings were made in the 1930s. So
it's a pretty big chunk of history.
Yeah, it's a chunk of history, but if you use the harmonica as just a touch point in that chunk of history, I think it makes analysis a lot simpler. But then you do have to learn the context of things and to see where the music came from. So, for example, D. Ford Bailey, who was on the Grand Ole Opry, he had a couple of what you would call traditional old-time tunes, like Ice Water Blues, which wasn't a blues at all, and then the Foxchase, I would say, would be traditional in the sense that it would be passed along. But then he did a lot of work adapting popular blues tunes from the early 1920s that he had heard to the harmonica, and he would play those on the Grand Ole Opry too. So just straight harp blues, like the Memphis Blues, or other Muscle Shoals blues, things like that. So harmonica has things that it's good at, and there are plenty of examples from history of that.
Mm-hmm. What do you think are the chances for a resurgence of old-time harmonica, 21st century?
Well, I teach lessons on Skype, so I have a student from the UK. I've had a student from Alabama and California, and I think there's interest, and I think the barrier to entry is a lot lower than it used to be. And there are plenty of examples to listen to, the old examples as well as new examples. to fit right in. But yeah, the compatibility of harmonica with old time music is I've never had an issue with a tune particularly, except maybe modal tunes, which I have to play cross harp and it kind of sounds bluesy, which is not within the taste preference that I like, but that's not very common. I mean, it's not so common that someone gets out their second fiddle and plays a modal tune, but I'll try to play it too. Mm-hmm. But the problem with the modal tune is that you have to bend the notes, which sort of slows down the music, changes the tone of the music, and so it's not like a consistent sounding harmonica throughout the tune. But with straight harp tunes, and I guess even the nomenclature for fiddle is kind of the same as harmonica. There's cross fiddle, that's where modal tunes are played out of, right? Sometimes?
Often, yeah.
Yeah, so then I would use cross harp to play cross fiddle. And that's the only sort of tension that comes in with playing harmonica in old-time music.
And why not use a chromatic harmonica?
Because it sounds like a toy. To me, it sounds like a toy. It takes a lot of work to make a chromatic harmonica sound good, I think. It doesn't breathe well. There are like valves that are blocking the sound. Kind of gives it a weird tone. But I've run into some old timers that have played chromatic harmonica in bluegrass before. No one seemed to have a problem with it. And a lot of traditional players, especially in Canada and Ireland, play tremolo harmonicas, which have sort of a double set of reeds that are kind of off tune slightly to give this sort of louder sound. Mm-hmm. And I guess another issue with the harmonica is that it's kind of a quiet instrument compared to the fiddle or the banjo. It doesn't project as much, so you really have to, if you want to be heard, you have to blow hard or play on the top half of the harmonica a lot. Mm-hmm. So there are some other issues, I guess, that have to be considered.
What are you really into in terms of harmonica these days? What are you working on, or what are you excited about?
I like to take tunes and then make my own arrangements of them, sort of like Dr. Humphrey Bate might have done. So there's a Uncle Dave Macon tune, Gray Cat on a Tennessee Farm, that I've been working on. I can play it just as an example, where I kind of incorporate things that Dr. Humphrey Bate would have done if he were playing this type of tune. Just as an example, and this takes from Dr. Humphrey Bate and another harmonica player named Kyle Wooten, who had a really punchy style. So I got sort of a couple of those different ideas going on. So I try to draw from examples that existed into the things I do solo, and then I try to take examples of things that were done in an ensemble form in those times, like the Red Foxchasers have the tune Mississippi Sawyer, and the guy is just playing the harmonica like a machine gun. Like the rhythm is just so piercing in some way. And one reason for that is when you draw on the harmonica, it's a minor chord, and it's dissonant. especially considering the music. So if you do something like to create a rhythmic pattern, that dissonance kind of stands out, but it's so brief that it doesn't really disrupt the music too much. Just makes it more lively. Mm-hmm. So that's what I try to go for when I play with other people.
Cool. So we're going to look forward to an album of solo harmonica arrangements?
Maybe in 10 years.
All right.
Yeah, take some time.
For sure. Okay.
What do you want to play? Let's play Old Turkey in the Straw.